Good evening, everybody. Hope you've had a nice day so far. And now for the highlight of the day and the evening. We've got our Central Lancashire Strategic Planning Joint Advisory Committee. So item number 1 is the appointment of a chair.
Councillor?
Yeah,
Could I nominate yourself, please?
Thanks very much. Any other nomination? Seconded by Councillor Stringfellow. Do you know, I can't see the name levels, but I know it's Elaine. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Right, it's me then. Okay. So, you know, it works. I've got the script. So, welcome everyone and thank you for attending this meeting of the Central Lancashire Strategic Planning Joint Advisory Committee. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Councillor Ian Watkinson and I'll be chairing this meeting of the JAC. Committee members and any members of the public attending are reminded that the first part of this meeting is being recorded and streamed live to YouTube. If you're joining us via Microsoft Teams and you wish to speak, please raise your hand and I'll invite you in when I'm prompted. For those here at the Civic Centre, please can you ensure that your mobile phones are either switched off or silent, and we don't anticipate a fire alarm drill. So if the alarm does go off, you should leave via the fire exits behind me and wait on the car park to the rear of the building. Okay, so can I ask everyone to really quickly introduce themselves? Those around the table, starting from my left and going round one by one, and then we'll go to the screen at the end. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Gail Wootton. I'm the Director of Property and Planning for both Chorley and South Ribble councils.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Thomas, the Planning Manager at South Ribble.
Benjamin Vickers, Planning Policy Team Leader. At South Ribble.
Ben Story, Democratic Services Officer. Councillor Alan Collins.
Hudson, Head of Planning and Transport at the County Council.
Caleb Tomlinson, Councillor for Bamberbridge West and the Chair of the Planning Committee here at South Ribble.
Elaine Stringfellow, Councillor for Lostock Hall and Vice Chair of South Ribble Planning Committee.
Councillor Craig Southern, Borough Councillor for Coston Moors, Exon South, here in Observatory Road.
Good evening, Councillor Amber Afzal, Cabinet Member for Planning and Regulation at Preston City Council.
Councillor Alex Silton from Chorley Council.
Councillor Alistair Bradley, Leader of Chorley Council.
Councillor Alistair Morwood, Chorley Council, Executive Member Planning and Development.
I'm Catherine Greenwood, I'm the Principal Planning Officer at Chorley Council.
I'm Eric Walk, the Project Manager of Central Lancashire Local Plan, working across the 3 council.
I'm Emma Price, I'm the Planning Policy Officer for the local plan, so like Eric, I'm across all 3 authorities.
Carolyn Williams, Planning Policy Manager at Preston City Council.
And Chris Hayward, Director of Development and Housing at Preston City Council.
Okay, thanks very much for that so far. So members of the JAC that are online, you'll know who you are. I'm not sure how to do this really without people diving in. We'll go for Councillor Green first.
Thank you, Chairman. Michael Green, County Councillor and Cabinet Member for Health and Wellbeing at Lancashire County Council. Apologies, I can't be with you tonight due to other commitments, but joining online.
Thanks very much. Councillor Whitton.
I'm County Councillor Sue Whittam. So I'm here tonight. Sorry, I couldn't get there either.
Not a problem. Thanks very much. And Councillor Potter.
Hi, County Councillor and Preston City Councillor John Potter. You definitely don't want me there because I've got post-political conference lurgy, so you don't want me anywhere near a room with you, but I'm happy to listen along.
Right, thanks very much for those introductions. Everybody's really welcome. So we'll move on with the agenda and to item 3, apologies for absence.
I received, Chair.
Okay, no apologies received. Item 4, declarations of interest. I'll read it out. Members are reminded of their responsibilities to declare any pecuniary interest in respect of matters contained in this agenda. Are there any interest to declare? No? Wonderful. Moving on to item 5, the minutes of the meeting held on 7th of February 2024. I have the minutes of our meeting in front of me. Can I have a proposer and a seconder so that we can approve those? Proposed by Councillor
propose those, Chair.
Bradley.
I'll happily second that, Chair.
Seconded by Councillor Tomlinson. We'll just have a show of hands on that. All those in favour of those being approved? Thank you very much. So that takes us on to item 6. And Gail Wooten, our Director of Property and Planning, is going to present this report. Over to you, Gail.
Thank you very much, Chair. So this report is to note the contents of the report. That's the recommendation, and it just provides an update in terms of the progress of the Central Lancashire local plan since we last met. We are progressing in accordance with the local development scheme that was approved earlier this year by each of the councils. And just to note before I move into the detail of this, that at paragraph 7, we do allude to the fact that the government has recently closed a consultation on planning reforms, including a revised national planning policy framework just this week. There is a separate agenda item on this, so that will be covered then. It's also important to note that the councils don't consider there to be a need to revise the published LDS at this time. So moving on to the section that begins at paragraph 9 on site selection. These paragraphs talk about that we're nearing completion with the work, and there's a list of the various different types of assessments that have been underway in relation to the housing and employment allocations. This section also talks about how we've sent a questionnaire out to all of the site promoters and the landowners of sites that we're considering to put into the local plan. And this is a good practice measure, part of our ongoing building of the evidence around deliverability, because we will be scrutinised at examination in terms of the deliverability of the sites that we do put forward. So that's why the questionnaire has been sent out to site promoters and landowners. Moving on to the next section, which is about the strategic flood risk assessment, which is one of the key pieces of evidence that we have to produce. There's an update there for members of the JAC in relation to the phase 1 work that's been concluded, and then recommendations of which sites should be moving into the phase 2 of the SFRA. What you won't be surprised to hear is that the phase 2 SFRA is slightly more detailed than the phase 1 of the SFRA. So we'll look to whether there really is an issue in terms of any type of flood risk with any of the sites that we may be considering. So work is awaited on that level 2 SFRA. The next section talks about policy preparation and describes in paragraph 21 that there are currently 64 policies that the team are busy working. And paragraph 22 gives you a flavour of the 10 chapters that those policies will sit in, and just reflects really the breadth of what's in this local plan. We do tend to talk about housing and employment quite a lot, but we mustn't forget there's also policies in relation to health and inclusive communities, climate change, travel and infrastructure delivery, for example. Paragraphs 23 references how, and actually moving into the next section, references how when we are at a position where we're fairly comfortable as a group of councils with those draft policies, that we will be sharing those with relevant statutory consultees for their comments. So people like Lancashire County Council, for example, the Highways Authority in relation to the transport policies. And that's part of good practice in relation to what's our legal duty to cooperate with a range of statutory consultees. So just a little bit more on the duty to cooperate in the next section. This is a legal requirement. It is one of the things that is a kind of pass or fail for local planning except a sort of shades of grey that the rest of it really is. We either meet the duty to cooperate or we fail the duty to cooperate. And work is currently underway to refresh some of the discussions with a range of statutory consultees. That includes neighbouring local authorities, and that also includes bodies such as Natural England, the Environment Agency, United Utilities, for example. So it's a continuation of work that the team have been doing for a number of years now, but obviously as we're getting to a point where we have draft policies, draft sites, that information will be shared with them through a series of conversations, essentially to get to the point where they are happy with the plan that we will be submitting to government next year. And so paragraph 26, 27 talks about the idea that we would work on a series of statements of common ground with those bodies, which does set out where we do agree that the plan, hopefully in their view as well as ours, is a sound plan to be moving forward with. The employment land study is the next piece of evidence that the report touches on, and just to say that we're awaiting an update on the employment land study there in terms of the employment land need across the 3 local authorities, and then we'll obviously marry that up with the site information that we have in terms of our supply. Similarly, from a housing evidence perspective, we're awaiting pieces of work in terms of our the need for housing across the 3 boroughs. There's a point there at paragraph 30 how we are proposing to plan for, as we did within the preferred options consultation, plan for more than the current standard method figure, which is the 944 figure. And that once that proposed housing requirement is confirmed, we will marry that up with our amount of supply across the 3 boroughs to make sure that we can meet the figure that we set out as our requirement. Paragraph 32 just references that we've got a housing needs and demands study, which talks about a range of other types of housing, including gypsy and traveller accommodation review, need for affordable homes, for example. A very short update in relation to the retail evidence. Sorry, I've just picked up a typo in the report there. That we have commissioned a retail evidence update to support our retail policies. And then just in relation to infrastructure, the next 2 sections, both the playing pitch strategy, what's really critical from the local plan is that we work with the providers of infrastructure, whether it is playing pitches or play areas, which is largely ourselves as providers of those through the work that our teams do, to actually look at the impact of that future growth on a variety of different infrastructure. So we've kicked off a piece of work around playing pitch strategy, which will be looking at the need for football pitches, netball pitches, hockey pitches. I'm not sure a hockey pitch, hockey cricket ground. Yes. Sorry, I'm showing my own ignorance here with a variety of terminology. So that piece of work will also show where maybe investment is required in some of those areas. And then more broadly, that's next section in terms of the infrastructure delivery plan. We are commissioning some consultants, Hydroc consultants, to look at wider pieces of infrastructure. So that might be from a transport perspective, it might be from a health perspective, it might be from a flood risk perspective, for example, or to understand how the demands from growth set out within the Central Lancashire local plan will trickle into the need for investment in infrastructure. So that forms part of our infrastructure delivery plan, which then has a link to community infrastructure levy and section 106 payments when applications come forward. And then the final section in relation to the work that's ongoing is just policy mapping. So one of the things that we produce alongside the plan is a map to show you where all these wonderful things are going to be. We're also looking at how to do that on a digital format as well, because obviously that's becoming more standard rather than very large unwieldy documents that fold in one way but then don't fold again. And then there's a couple of sections there in terms of equality and diversity and risk. So that was it, Chair, just to run through. Happy to take any comments or questions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Gail. Comprehensive report there. Really interesting and helpful. So does anybody have any questions or comments on the committee? Councillor Collins.
Yeah, thanks very much for not being facetious. It's agenda page 10, item 14. Where it actually says appropriate elected members. Is it considered that district councillors should be appropriate elected members? We have a wide remit looking across the county, and I just wonder whether the district councillors for each area should have been consulted.
I'll pass that over to you, Gail.
Sorry, could you remember which page reference you were talking to?
Agenda page 10, item 14. Agenda item 6, page 10. 14.
Yes, sorry, I'm with you now. Thank you for your patience. It is still ongoing work in relation to that site selection, so there will be a range of communications with a variety of members as we move through into the publication stage.
So that will include district councillors, county councillors fundamentally as well.
Councillor Bradley.
Just for benefit of some people who may remember the last meeting, I think we discussed it at a previous meeting where I think it was referred to each of the district councils doing it in their own way, but obviously consulting with members how they saw fit. So that was, yes, it will include district councils and everybody, but it will be done differently in different councils because we won't want to dictate to councils how they did information and consultation with their own members. I think that was the agreement we'd had quite a while ago, but it was like 2 or 3 meetings ago.
Okay, thank you. That's really helpful. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Bradley.
Just one point, Chair, to make, and obviously I have said this for years, and we're getting towards the end of this process, hopefully, which has since taken us years. I've seen like many politicians come and go. Are we comfortable that, given all this work on these 60 policies and what have you, that we're going to be in a position by the end of the year where we intend to be? Because that's a lot of work. We're into October next week. That's 3 months. Are we comfortable that we've got all the resources that we need to do this and everybody's aligned to where we need to get to? Because I would hate to run later than we have to.
Okay, I would imagine there's probably more than one answer going to come here, but we'll start with Gail.
From an officer perspective, yes, we are at an advanced stage. A lot of this does talk about awaiting reports, but some of it we've seen draft reports of. We are in regular conversations with the consultants that are producing some of those reports. So from an officer perspective, absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else on that, or any other questions or comments on this item? No? Online? Wonderful. That takes us on then to item 7. And proposed reforms to national planning policy framework and changes to the planning system. There's a presentation here from Emma Price. And is Emma online? Oh, no. Oh, I do apologise, Emma. You're right there.
It's okay.
Thanks very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just see if I can present these slides so everybody has something to look at. We'll give it a second. There we go. There we go. Cyberspace back again. Okay. Yeah. Perfect. So this presentation will be covering the proposed reforms to the National Planning Policy Framework and briefly highlight some of the other proposed changes to the planning system. So this presentation will look at the scope of the consultation, the main proposals the government are making, and look into the 3 main impacts that the changes could have on our local plan. I would like to remind everyone that this presentation is just a brief overview, and although it does focus on what changes could impact the Central Lancashire local plan, it will not go into depth or specifics. That information will be coming in Carolyn's presentation later on this evening. So the scope of the consultation, it was published on the 30th of July, and it seeks views on the proposed approaches to the revised NPPF and a series of wider national planning policy reforms to achieve sustainable growth. It also includes wider policy proposals in relation to increasing planning fees, local plan intervention criteria, and appropriate thresholds for certain nationally significant infrastructure projects. And the consultation closed 2 days ago on the 24th of September. There is a link here on the slides if anybody wants to look into it themselves a bit more detail later. These slides can be circulated. So the main proposals of the consultation are to implement a new standard method for assessing housing need in order to support the government's manifesto commitment of 1.5 million new homes and making that standard method mandatory. Making a 5-year housing land supply mandatory irrespective of plan status. So this means that authorities will have to continuously demonstrate 5 years of specific and deliverable sites for housing. It also broadens the existing definition of brownfield land, identifies grey belt land within the green belt to be brought forward, and that will be spoken about in a bit more detail later in this presentation as one of the three main impacts. It also looks at improving the operation of presumption in favor by can you hear myself? Don't like that. By clarifying the circumstances in which it applies and introducing new safeguards to make clear that its application cannot justify poor quality development. It makes wider changes to ensure authorities are able to prioritize the types of affordable homes their community needs, and supporting economic growth in key sectors aligned with the government's industrial strategy and future local growth plans, including laboratories, gigafactories, data centers, digital economies, freight, and logistics. So one of the key changes revolves around housing need. So as I said earlier, it's proposed to make the standard method for assessing housing needs mandatory and change in the formula. On the slide here, you can see a side-by-side of the current formula versus the newly proposed formula. So the new proposed formula uses a percentage of existing housing stock levels as its baseline. And this is designed to provide a stable baseline that drives a level of delivery proportionate to the existing size of settlements, rebalancing national distribution to better reflect growth ambitions across places like the Midlands and the North. It then tops up this baseline by focusing on those areas that are facing the greatest affordability pressures, using a stronger affordability multiplier to increase this baseline in proportion to price pressures. It also removes steps 3 and 4 that you can see in the current formula. So step 3 is a cap and step 4 is an uplift. And this is proposed that the approach is driven by an objective assessment of need. The table underneath those two formulas, which I realize is a bit small, so I apologize, but it shows the difference between the housing need under the current standard method and the proposed one. So I've split it between, you can see Chorley, Preston and South Ribble, but then the total at the bottom there. So the total for Central Lancashire under the current standard method is 994 dwellings, and then under the newly proposed is 1,809. So that's a difference of about 815 dwellings. The next proposal has to do with the green belt and grey belt. So it's proposed to require that where an authority cannot meet its identified housing or commercial need without altering green belt boundaries, said LPA must undertake a green belt review. This review should look to release poor quality grey belt from the green belt through both plan making and decision making to meet local needs. And this release would be subject to the sustainable development principles that underpin the national planning policy and clear golden rules, which they're introducing. Grey belt is defined as land in the green belt comprising previously developed land and any other parcels and or areas of green belt land that make a limited contribution to the 5 green belt purposes. And it's proposed that in instances where a local planning authority cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply or is delivering less than 75% against the housing delivery test, or where there is unmet commercial or other need, development on the green belt would not be considered inappropriate when it is on the sustainable grey belt land. So the next impact is to plan making and where authorities are in terms of plan making. There are 3 different options for part of the consultation had proposed transitional agreements, and there are 3 options for authorities. I won't, again, be going into which we fall under. This will become later on this evening. But the first option is for plans that are already at examination, and those plans will continue under the current version of the NPPF. The second option is for plans that have reached Regulation 19 publication stage, but not yet submitted for examination 1 month after the revised framework is published. And the plans that these apply to, there also cannot be a gap of more than 200 dwellings between the local planning authority's revised local housing need figure and its proposed housing requirement. And then the third option is that all plans that are at any earlier stage than this would have to progress under the new version of the MPPF whenever that is published. So next steps, the consultation closed as of the 24th, as I said, and the next steps are for the government to go through all of the consultation responses. Thousands were apparently received, including ones from Chorley, South Ribble, Preston, and one jointly. And we now wait for the MPPF to be published. We don't have a firm date as to when this will be. So in the meantime, we just continue working on the local plan. And if there's any questions, that's...
Thanks very much, Emma. So are there any questions or comments? Anybody online? Nope. Well, thanks very much, Emma. That takes us neatly on to item 8, which is dates of future meetings. And there is a date that's already been set of the 9th of December. And it does dangerously say, does anyone have any questions or comments on these dates? But so I'm looking round. I mean, I think we'll move on from that one. Which just takes us on to item 9. So the exclusion of press and public. I'll read out the preamble. So due to the nature of the remaining item on the agenda, this will be discussed confidentially. Do I have a proposer to vote to exclude press and public for the remainder of the meeting? I need a proposer and a seconder for us to move on.
Yeah, I'm
Thanks very much, Councillor Hilton. Proposed and seconded by Councillor